What is going on, everybody? Thank you guys so much for joining me and welcome back to the channel. And continuing on with this series here with which teams have the most pressure to win a Stanley Cup this season, this video we're going to be talking about the Metropolitan Division. Taking a look at this division, I mean, it is the deepest in the league, and ranking these teams was a little bit tougher to decide. I mean, what I decided here based on my rankings, like from team to team, it was pretty marginal. So like, there's going to be a lot of controversy maybe on where I have these rankings compared to other people, but whatever. Let's get right into it. Hear me out here and enjoy the list. In this Metropolitan Division, the vast majority of these teams are expected to at the very least make the playoffs, if not compete for a Stanley Cup. So where I have placed these bottom two teams, I think it should be very obvious for most people. Getting into number 8, who I feel has the least pressure to win the Stanley Cup in this Metropolitan Division, I got the Columbus Blue Jackets. This to me was based on the offseason they had. I mean, they pretty much sold a ton of pieces in that offseason last year, and now entering this season, there is a significant dip in expectations. Whereas, the past couple of years, they were expected to be somewhat of a competitive team, maybe even make the playoffs, but now it no longer appears to be the case. And honestly, on paper, I don't think this team is that bad, but again, that Metropolitan Division is very tough. So a lot of people, including myself, don't expect this team to really even compete for a playoff spot. Taking a look at this core, it's actually pretty young. Patrick Laine, 23 years old. You got Oliver Bjorkstrand and Max Domi, both 26 years old. Jack Roslovic, who they acquired last season, had a very good season, only 24 himself. Looking at that blue line led by 24-year-old Zach Werenski, Jake Bean, 23 years old. They got Adam Boqvist, who's only 21 years old. They have a lot of very young pieces on that Blue Jackets roster right now. And even the goaltending tandem, we got two 27-year-olds in Elvis Merzlikins and Joonas Korpisalo. Now, I'm not going to say this team's in a rebuild because I honestly don't think they're that bad of a team. I look at the roster they have, it's pretty decent. I think they could be, somewhat competitive, but I still think they're probably kind of in a retool kind of direction right now. Combine that with the fact that, no one really expects this team to make the playoffs, especially in this very tough Metropolitan Division. That's why they basically have no pressure at all to win a Stanley Cup this season or the next 2, 3, 4 years, maybe at the very least, I think. Next up at the number 7 spot, I got the New Jersey Devils. Essentially the other team in this division that is not expected to make the playoffs. But the sole reason I have them ahead of Columbus, I think there's a little bit more of expectation for the New Jersey Devils to be a lot more competitive this season and maybe push for a playoff spot, unlike Columbus, where I feel like expectations are just much lower. And I think people view the Devils as a much, much better team, even though they haven't proved it yet, but we'll see. There's no question that this young Devils team is only getting better. And looking at that core they have, I mean, these guys have not even scratched the surface in the National Hockey League. I mean, taking a look at their forward group here, you got Nico Hischier, 22 years old, Jesper Bratt, 23, Pavel Zacha, 24. You got Igor Sharangovich and Yanni Kuokkanen, both 23 years old. And of course, Jack Hughes, who is expected to take a massive step forward this year, 20 years of age. Now on defense, they are a little bit older, but I mean, their oldest guy is PK Subban at 32, and no one else on that D-core is over 30 years old. Then of course, their future netminder, Mackenzie Blackwood, who has already proven he's a solid starting goaltender in this league. He's still only 24 years old, potentially hasn't even entered the prime of his career yet. So basically, this team is going to be a problem in the next 2-3 years. But as of right now, they're just developing their guys and getting just a little bit better, being more competitive. But in terms of them winning a Stanley Cup this season or even making the playoffs, there's no pressure whatsoever. Now, from this point on, these other 6 teams to me, I feel like are all in a very similar position where they're all expected to compete for a playoff spot, and most of these teams are expected to compete for a Stanley Cup. How I ranked these guys was based on, how long their Stanley Cup window is to date. So basically, the lowest ranked team is a team that I feel is very young and is going to have a lot of opportunity to win a Stanley Cup within the next decade. And obviously those top 2-3 teams are the older teams that, their time might be running out. So judging on what I just said, I think you guys know where I'm going here. 6th on this list, I got the New York Rangers. Unlike the Devils, this Rangers team is still young and it's definitely an up and coming, threat to win a Stanley Cup in the coming years. However, unlike the Devils, the Rangers are legitimately expected to make the playoffs this season and finally take that next step and basically end the rebuild. Basically at every position, they have established superstar players right now. You got Artemi Panarin, who is one of the best players in the league. One of the few guys I feel can score 100 plus points in his sleep. 29 years of age in the prime of his career. Then you got Mika Zibanejad, Ryan Strome, both 28 years old. Very, very solid players on that Rangers team, of course. Then you got the younger guys on this team that are really going to stretch that window wide open for the next decade plus. In goal, you got Igor Sharangovich, Alexander Georgiev, two very solid netminders, both 25 years old. And a very young blue line with even more prospects coming in, led by, of course, Adam Fox, who just won the Norris Trophy and is just 23 years old. And some of the younger guys up front, like Capo Caco and Alexis Lafreniere, both 20 years old and looking to, take the next step and really solidify themselves as legitimate star players in this league based on where they were drafted, number 1 overall for Lafreniere and 2nd overall for Capo Caco. So this team is going to be a huge threat for the next decade. I know that for a fact. Just looking at this roster, they're going to be a huge problem, especially as the Metropolitan Division, some of those higher teams start to get older and kind of lose their game a bit. Look for the Rangers to pop off and be the team to beat in that Eastern Conference, or a top 2, top 3 team for the next decade, I think. But at least for this season, I don't see the pressure for them to win a Stanley Cup, but there is some pressure for them to at least take the next step and make the playoffs. Coming in at number 5 here, I got the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers are an interesting case where, a couple years ago, they were considered a Stanley Cup contender, and maybe they're trying to get back to that, obviously missing the playoffs last season. They're looking to bounce back, but also they have a ton of young guys on this team, so it's a bit of a weird combination, I would say. Obviously, the bulk of this team's success is going to depend on what type of production they're going to get between the pipes. Carter Hart is their netminder for now and the foreseeable future, only 23 years old, so he's going to be relied upon to get this team into contention for the next 15 years. On defense, they're relatively young as well, with some other really solid prospects coming up on that blue line. But in terms of what they have right now, they got Ivan Provorov, 24 years old, their number 1 defenseman currently. Rasmus Ristolainen, 26. Travis Samheim, who's 25. Some very solid names there. Now, in terms of the forwards, there are some veterans on this team like Claude Giroux, James Van Riemsdyk, Cam Atkinson, all of which are either 32 or 33 years old. But of course, you got the Travis Konecnys of the world. He's 24. Then you got, of course, Joel Farabee, only 21 years old. Some of those young guys, especially Konecny, looking to bounce back. But Farabee is a very solid player who I think is going to be one of the better goal scorers in this league. So yeah, this Flyers team, they have a lot of young pieces with some veterans, but also, some pretty good prospects coming up in that farm system for them. So the reason why I have them this low on this list is I feel like even though there's some guys who maybe their windows are closing, they're kind of opening a new window in the process with all the young guys they have and all the prospects have coming in. I just feel like they're still going to be a really good team, even when guys like Claude Giroux and James Van Riemsdyk are no longer the players they are now. Coming in at number 4, I have the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, the Hurricanes have been considered pretty much a contender over the last 3 years. Now, maybe they haven't gotten to that level yet and haven't gotten that type of respect, but I feel like at this point, now is really the time where they need to start, taking ownership as to being a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. And they are going to be a very good team for the next, 5, 6, 7, 8 years for sure. Sebastian Ajo entering his prime, 24 years old. Andrei Svechnikov looking to take a massive step forward, 21 years old. Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who they just acquired from that offer sheet from Montreal. Although we don't know what his ceiling is at this point, he's only 21, so there is some room left to grow for him, sure. Seth Jarvis, 19 years old. Martin H is 22. They got a lot of really good forwards already, but still pretty young. On defense, it's a relatively young decor as well. Jacob Slavin, Brady Shea, both 27. Brett Pesce's 26. Just with those guys that they have, they're still going to be in the mix for a Stanley Cup for quite a while. So I feel like the pressure isn't as high, but it definitely is starting to mount a little bit that this team needs to take the next step, and hopefully they can win a cup within the next 2 or 3 years. But also there is a little bit more pressure now that they, trade away Alex Nedeljkovic, who was going to be their future netminder, but for some reason they lowballed him, and now they have a tandem of Frederik Andersen and Antti Ranta, both of which are 32 years old. So, they're in kind of the second half of their careers, and they're probably still going to be solid for, next few years. But now that you have older goaltenders, it takes a little bit of pressure, puts more pressure on these guys to actually start and win now. But compared to the top 3 teams I had ahead of them, Carolina's window is a lot wider than those 3 teams. So that's why I feel like there's not a significant amount of pressure in comparison to those teams. But internally, there is a little bit of pressure for Carolina to do something because they have a lot of talent and now's the time, right? Coming in at the number 3 spot in this Metropolitan Division, I got the New York Islanders. With the Islanders, they've established themselves as a true Stanley Cup contender over these last 3 years, especially those last 2 years going to back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals. Now, people are starting to take notice. I don't feel like they're being disrespected anymore. They know that this team has all the pieces to win a Stanley Cup. It's just a matter of can they actually do it. And although their core is not as old as those other 2 teams that I have yet to mention, there are some pretty big pieces here that are starting to get up there in age, entering like the early 30s right now. Like Anders Lee for one, who's 31 years old. Brock Nelson, who's nearing his 30s at 29. Kyle Palmieri, still a very solid goal scorer, although I don't know if he is, what he was in New Jersey. But anyway, 30 years old for him, as well as Josh Bailey, who's 32. Those are just a few of the core guys who are a little bit older. But apart from that, there are some pretty young pieces like Matthew Barzal, who's going to be a great player for a long time, 24 years old. Anthony Beauvillier, who's only 24 as well. Oliver Wahlstrom, who I feel like is going to be very, very good. 21 years old. I think he has some potential to be a very solid goal scorer in this league. Then you got some relatively young defensemen, Adam Pelech, Ryan Pollock, Scott Mayfield, all of which are 27 or 28. Noah Dobson, 21 years old right there. Very young, and he's got a bright future in this league. Then the goaltending, even though, Semyon Varlamov, I believe, is like 33 years old, so he doesn't have a ton of prime years left in him. However, Ilya Sorokin is the up-and-coming guy, the future starter. He's 26. So there is still a bit of a window for this Islanders team to be a competitive team and be a contender. I feel like they have their 3-4 year window to do it, but, they got to get going, right? I mean, they've been a good team, but can they finally get over the hump and win that Stanley Cup? That remains to be seen. Considering what we've seen from this team over the past few years, the pressure is only going to continue to mount and get more significant as more years go on without this core winning a Stanley Cup. For these top 2 teams, it was a bit of a toss-up for me, but ultimately, I had my logic with it, so I'll just get into it right now and explain it to you. So, the team that I feel has the second most pressure to win a cup in that Metropolitan Division is the Pittsburgh Penguins. This to me is very obvious. It's basically because time is running out with that core. Chris Letang, 34 years old. Evgeny Malkin, 35 years old. Sidney Crosby, 34 years old. Those are the core 3 guys, and yes, they got a lot of solid pieces. I mean, most of which are like late 20s, early 30s anyway. So yeah, they have their pieces, but those are the core guys that, have carried this team over the last 15 years, and time is running out for those guys to, lead this Penguins team to try to get to another Stanley Cup or 2, right? And yes, they do have a lot of solid young pieces like Jake Gensel, I think is still going to be a good player. And Tristan Jarry could use a bounce back season in goal. They're only 26. But, that team really is relied upon from those veterans. I just feel that Penguins team will go wherever those guys will take them. Now, what puts the pressure on even more, what makes it higher, is the fact that some people don't even think this Penguins team can make the playoffs because of the injuries to Crosby and Malkin that they have. Well, recording this video, it's October 13th, and last night they played one hell of a game without those 2 guys against the defending Stanley Cup champions. So I'm not too worried about this Penguins team. I still feel like, they always just push through with those injuries that they have every single season. And I feel like they're still going to be a really good team, and I expect them to make the playoffs. Yeah, I still feel like there's a year or 2 left, but definitely time is running out. So they got to win that last Stanley Cup before that core can no longer play at the elite level they still play at. And coming in at number 1, the team that I feel like has the most pressure to win the Stanley Cup in that Metropolitan Division, I believe it's the Washington Capitals. Now, like the Penguins, the Capitals are very similar in terms of their roster construction. Their core guys are up front. You got Alex Ovechkin, who is 36 years old. You got TJ Oshie, who's 34. Nicholas Backstrom's 33. John Carlson's 31. Those are their core guys. And, they're in their 30s now, so definitely time is running out for that Capitals team to win a Stanley Cup here. The Penguins, there is some people who even think the Capitals aren't going to make the playoffs this season, so that adds even more pressure as well. Now, maybe you could make the case that the Penguins have more pressure than the Capitals because I feel like the prospect pool is a little bit deeper in Washington in comparison to Pittsburgh. However, my logic to putting the Capitals in first and the Penguins in second is essentially because of how many cups the core has won for each of those teams. The Penguins under that core have won 3 Stanley Cups, and the Capitals have only won 1. The fact that they've won less, that automatically puts them higher in terms of pressure for them to, really be motivated to win more than just that one cup. Are they satisfied with that one cup? They shouldn't be. Fortunately, with teams like the Capitals and Penguins, although I still feel like they have the formula to be successful in the regular season, I don't know if they are the teams they once were as teams that can go on deep playoff runs anymore. They just have not shown that over the last 3 years. But obviously, when you have cores like they do, in their mid-30s now, the pressure is going to be at its highest until these guys retire or until they trade some guys away to start a retool rebuild, because these are the last years for teams like the Capitals and Penguins to compete for a Stanley Cup before things start to go south. So anyway, that is going to wrap up this video as to who I feel has the most pressure to win the Stanley Cup in the Metro Division, ranked from number 1 being the most pressure to number 8 being who has the least pressure. Let me know what you guys think about my rankings. Do you agree with everything I have here? Or if you disagree, what would you change? If you have anything else you'd like for me to cover in terms of the NHL world or anything about hockey, please let me know in the comments. I'm open to new ideas and, really getting some more content out for you guys. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to get out of here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Consider subscribing to the channel. And I will talk to y'all in the next one. I'll see you guys later.